So welcome. I'm very pleased to welcome you for this afternoon session, first session on aerospace technologies and data opportunities for SMEs. My name is Guillaume Delabrosse. I'm head of unit in DG Defis in the European Commission. I'm dealing with space innovation and startups. I'm very pleased as well to have together with me on that panel Jakub Wojcik. Then we have Reinhard Blasi, and we have Kevin Ramirez. So I will introduce them one by one. But before we start, I'd like to give a bit of an introduction and background about why we're here today. You've heard that space actually last week made a bit of headlines because of two big news. One, and that was a bit of history. The Commission, the Union as a whole, decided to launch the third constellation. So you know that we have Galileo when it comes to positioning, navigation, and timing. We have Copernicus for Earth observation, and last week the European Parliament, and the Council member states decided to give their green light for launching the third constellation on telecommunications, which will be a must. We have seen the need for telecommunications in Ukraine, for instance, but we know that it is a must. When we look at the demand for connectivity, we need to have a sovereign constellation, and that's what the Council and the Parliament decided for last week. So that was the first big headline, and again, this is history. We are not deciding to launch a new constellation owned by the Union every week, so that was a big step. The second big event last week was the Ministerial of the European Space Agency. You've heard about that as well. ESA gathered its ministers, and they decided as well to increase the level of ambition in space with a budget allocated to ESA programs roughly of 17 billion euros over the next 3 years. So those are evidences that space is a booming sector, and for good reasons. It's a booming sector because actually space is a critical enabler. It is an enabler for us, all of us, actually, as citizens. We do use many space data, even not being aware of that. It's a critical enabler for our economy. We have more and more businesses that develop thanks to space data and space services. And this is a critical enabler for our security as well. We know that security and defense more and more are using space services and data, and space assets are a critical enabler from that perspective as well. We are quite lucky in Europe to have large corporates in space. We do have lots of SMEs. We have more and more startups dealing with space as well. So we have what we call a space economy. And it's quite interesting to look at studies that were made in the past, that we have already globally today a space economy worth 500 billion euro, but estimations are that the space economy should grow very quickly to reach $1 trillion around 2040. And what's quite interesting is that we have more and more SMEs, more and more startups willing to make investment in space, to make business, to develop space, business in space for one simple reason, is that the cost to access to space has been reduced drastically. It has been divided by 10 over the past years. Notably because SpaceX has completely killed the price on the market. So it means that access to space is not so costly as it used to be. And it means that entrepreneurs can really develop business in space, in accessing space quickly and at good price. So today we see that we have many SMEs, but we have more and more startups. This is what we call the new space ecosystem that is developing very fast. And actually we as a Commission, NewSPA, and together with the European Space Agency, we are fully behind the development and the acceleration of that new space ecosystem, if you want. Why? Because it's really where you find disruptive technologies and innovation. It is there where we find new industrial processes, because we have many SMEs and startups bringing together different industry, like automotive and space industry, like digital and space industry, cyber and space industry. So we're building synergies between different industry, and that's excellent. And then third, because of competitiveness, what they do, the startups, they're trying to develop new models and to really sell their products and technologies at very good price. So that's why we are very behind this new ecosystem. How do we do that? First, we try to steer a bit that ecosystem through the big flagship programs. I mentioned Galileo, Copernicus, and secure connectivity. Those big programs, lots of investment, but we want that part of the investment is steering the business of those startups and SMEs. Then two, we do have specific programs to boost the development of those startups and SMEs. I'd like to mention Horizon Europe. We have roughly 1.6 billion euros during up until 2027 to develop certain technologies that directly benefit SMEs and startups, and we'll hear more from that from Reinhard. We have the Cassini program. Cassini, very important. You need to keep that in mind. Cassini is the program of the Commission to boost the startups in space. We have a 1 billion euro investment funds. We are providing coaches, mentoring to startups. We are providing matchmaking opportunities for the startups. We are facilitating access to finance. So there is a program that the Commission is running in support of startups and SMEs. And what we see is that we have a very strong traction. We are developing as well the new space ecosystem and the SMEs in trying to develop new business segments. I'd like to mention two. One is space and defense. So we're breaking silos. We are bringing together space and defense and security. And that will open up new business segment as well for SMEs and startups. And there are domains like in-orbit servicing that are quite new business segments, but that we are developing as well in trying to put in place what we call prototypes or pathfinder missions. So basically using the leverage of public investment to de-risk investment, demonstrate that there is a business case, and then industry will invest in those space segments. So without further ado, I'd like first to hear from Jakub. Basically the company, you are the VP for business development of Primoco, right? Dealing with drones. So Jakub, I'll pass you the floor, and maybe you'll tell us more from SME viewpoint what the Commission and the European Union can do.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. Appreciate the introduction. My name is Jakub Wojcik. I will tell you a little bit about how we see the current situation with the drones in the European Union and what's the feeling of the ecosystem we are working in. So I'll go through my slides. If you look at the UAS, unmanned aerial system markets, European Union is a third world market by size, by amount of money which are invested into the technology, and by the number of the drones which are being purchased. You can see even the breakdown that still the military part is the major one and presents some 40%. Recreational drones which are using for your pleasure are second most important segment of the market, and then it comes to commercial drones. And this is going to change over the time because obviously commercial and other activities are growing, so there's no doubt that the drones will take over quite a lot of activities which are typically done by the manned aircraft or by some ground things. In the aviation in general, it's absolutely the fastest growing market you can imagine, because you cannot sell much more Boeings or Airbus planes, much more than the previous years, while with the drones, and there are two lines. One is the delivery of the drones, which is rising as well, and also the services of the drone, which is very interesting area for a boom of potential suppliers, and obviously all the associated services related to that, like the data processing and other stuff, are being grown every year by by two-digit numbers. So it's the fastest growing aviation segment right now. And obviously, there is expected that the market will grow tremendously in terms of some new technologies for agriculture, for law enforcement, for some other activities. So in general, we are talking about a market which is only going to grow, and there is no expectation that it will change, and it will grow much faster than anything else what we have in the aviation segment. Yeah. There's a quote from Ursula von der Leyen. I'm sorry for the layout. It looked well on my presentation. And she said that we must, they must, as a European Commission, to remove all the obstacles that still hold the small companies back. And when it comes to UAVs or UAS, what is it? There is a billion of them. The reason why I'm showing it to you is that there's the opportunity on one side that the drones will grow dramatically. On the other side, there is a lot of concerns which are justified, starting with the security, starting with the safety on the ground, with the standardization, which is somehow getting into that training of the people and so on and so on. What I'm trying to demonstrate is that if you think about the growing of this area, you cannot think in an isolated view that you want to make a better drone. You need to think about the ecosystem, about how you can ensure the safety, how you can ensure the data protection, how you can be compliant with the GDPR, how you can focus on the training, for example, integration into the airspace and so on. It's probably, on one hand, the area of the aviation industry which is going to grow at the fastest pace, but on the other hand, it's the area which is having the most obstacles on the way, which needs to be overcome. So anything, how you look at UAVs, you need to think globally and really look from the top that there are all the parts which are necessary for safe operation needs to be discussed and touched somehow. How I see European Union as a member of the industry here, let's start with a little historical tour. 30 years ago, 90% of the manned aircraft, either military, civilian, it doesn't matter, were produced in the Europe, United States, and in Russia. And that was it. So if I ask you about a company, name me one company which is producing planes. It will be Boeing, it will be Airbus. And that was for decades happening that way. And basically the Europe and USA and partially Russia build the standards for the aviation. And then let's look at the UAVs right now. 90% of the UAVs sold today in any category are coming from China, are coming from Israel, Turkey, and United States. Except United States, which is a little bit different. Name me one Chinese plane or Israeli plane or Turkish plane you want to fly in. You'll not find them. Those countries never had the legacy aviation industry. They never had this opportunity. They were always suppliers for a long time. And now they are creating basically the industry standards because they are producing absolute majority. If you want to go to eBay or if you want to go to Amazon and you want to buy some drone, most likely it will come from China. It will not come from Europe. So what I'm trying to say is that as a continent, not as a country, not as individual companies, not as the individual people, but as a continent, we are losing competence in a fastest growing aviation segment. And the question is how we can stop that. Because here what I'm missing in all those strategies which are discussing how we will improve the Europe for the future generation, this is what's missing. There is a tunnel and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but the question is if is it not like a light of a train coming opposite direction, because seriously think about that this technology is dominated by the countries which, except US, all of them never built the real planes which were sold wide world and which were successful. And this is really, I think, quite a momentum in thinking about the UAS sector. And why is that? Because if you look at the European Union, we have a very detailed regulation. In 2020, there came civilian regulation for the drones. We, in the military side, for example, we established a European military airworthiness regulation. So we have a perfect regulation, and we have recognized civilian and military aviation authorities. If you say that Germany or UK, for example, even as it left the European Union, or Italy or France certifies a drone, there will be nobody questioning the qualities of that. But you can say the same if you have a drone from Turkey. Will you believe in the certification standards? Most likely not, because the authority doesn't have the legacy, doesn't have the, let's say, trust level, or how to say it. We have a space agencies, we have a space program, so we have the access to the space technology, which are a dominant part for navigation and other services. We have the industry. There are companies which are operating for 100 years and built thousands of planes. And we have the technological precision. We are not driven by the low-cost solution, quantity, and only numbers. We really think about like the technology precision, see? And we have the safety in the DNA. Nothing in Europe can fly unless it's safe. That's why we have the standards. That's why we have the authorities. That's why we have the structure around it. And we have a very tremendous amount of potential users in Europe. And then look at the China and Turkey. I will take them an example because they present more than 50% of the market. They have almost no regulation which can be internationally recognized. None. If somebody gives you something with the Chinese certificate of conformity, you will not think much about that because you don't know how it was built. They don't have the civil aviation authorities which can be recognized anywhere else because they are not part of the European Union, of the EASA, and some other international organizations. They have no space agencies on their own, so they rely on European and American sources. They have fast-growing industry. This is their biggest achievement and ability in this area. And they are very much focused on the quantity. Selling, selling, selling. The quantity is what matters. For them, the safety is not a part of the DNA. Because in China, all the aviation industry is state-regulated. So state says what's good, and it doesn't care about if somebody is protesting against that. And they are all state-controlled users. So even if you think about, for example, the proliferation of the drones, you will never have the same amount of the operators in China, which is 1 billion people country, like in the European Union, because quite a lot of things in China are state-controlled. So the market is limited, it's deformated by the background. So we have everything in our aces, in our sleeve, but still we are not leading the industry. This is another momentum I would like you to take from this speech. We as a company, Primoco, and by the way, downstairs at the expo you can see one of our drones, we are the first fixed-wing UAV in our category, which is 150 kilograms heavy, which was certified according to European Union standards to self-regulate our operation. And unfortunately, left part of the picture is right. European Union accepted some regulation, there comes some operation, and there comes some experience. And that's it. That's how we process flow in this area. And what we need more to think, and this is about the rule makers, about the national civil aviation authorities, and all the subjects involved, we need the right part. That this is not isolated parts, this is not a project flow like going one stream, because one part should be rotating all the other parts, and they should be still in some, let's say, mechanism which is helping to flow, for example, the knowledge back to the regulation and vice versa. And we don't have that quite yet, which is one of the biggest frustrations, if I can tell you, from the operation in European Union, that we have the perfect setup, we have a perfect result, but we are the company which was flying, for example, in 6 European Union countries. And guess how many times somebody from the role maker or similar environment asked us about the experience? 0 point. So there's no reflection on whatever is happening, which is another issue which I believe is a little bit holding us back in our situation. So what went wrong? What was the strategy of the European Union in terms of drones? I'm not talking about the super large military ones or security ones. This is a different animal. But what's the strategy? Do we have some? I don't think we really have a clear strategy. We have a lot of fund programs, grant programs, and we are really missing the global picture where we want to go. Do we want to have this as a competence in the continent or don't? We don't have a clear answer on that yet. What's the support of the European Union to make the drones? This is another big area for improvement. And we should think about how we can improve the life of the companies like we, for example, which pass some level through the certification, and to push them in front because they will be leading the industry for the European continent. Was the feedback? I was talking about that. Really, the rule maker doesn't hear too much what's happening in the real life. They create some strategies, they don't talk too much, and I'm using this stage to pass this message, for example. And how are the European Union expertise and competences used? We have enormous opportunity to move the continent to some other level if this will go not to work, what I'm trying to say you, but we are not moving there. Another point is, what's the involvement of the big sharks? Have you ever heard about the Airbus, sorry for naming them, I like that company, about the Airbus UAV? Raise a hand if you heard about Airbus UAV. There's nobody. That's wrong. You know, like Airbus is the largest company in Europe in the aviation. They should be. Leonardo, tell me if you heard about them. They have some, but this is really not equivalent or comparable with the manned production. Are there any multinational UAV projects? If you go for the helicopters, if you go for the fighters, if you go for whatever kind of the equipment which is being produced and designed in the European Union, there's a lot of examples where the European Union companies and countries gathered together to put all the effort into one single project. And we don't have it for the UAVs, other than the super large military ones, I know. And what I believe is that we should have a drone management to be centralized, because we have it for the aviation, but we are missing manned aviation, but we are missing that for the drones. And this is also something where if you don't control the process, if you don't have some clear strategy how you manage the process, it's very difficult to take some feedback from that. And how are the existing support programs working? We, for example, as a company, were built completely ignoring any grant or subsidy or state support, because we didn't found them that they are helping to our growth and to reaching to a different level. So, I know I shouldn't do the promo, but I want to tell you, last point from my presentation, what does it mean to be in a UAV industry, let's put it that way, today? It's not enough if you build a drone. What you need to do is, you need to be recognized, standardized. My colleagues Kevin, I think, will talk about the standardization a little bit later in a different aspect. You need to be somehow certified, somehow understandable for the customers, that they know what to expect from you. And the only way how to do it is the certification. That's why we are, for example, the holder of the LUC, which is Light Unmanned certificate. And you can see the number, 0001. It's really terrible that a small company of 40 guys is the first one who is really certified according to European standards. Something is wrong here. You need to be design production organization according to military standards if you want to wish, for example, to work in the military area. Again, we are understandable, we are clear, recognized, and the customer knows what to expect. We had to buy own airfield and own airspace, because we are missing a place where we can test it. Again, what's the background from the state, from the European Union? Obviously, if you build a drone, you need to test it, you need to fly, and there will be risk, because development is a controlled risk. So we had to buy own airfield and own airspace. To be credible for the partners, we entered a Prague Stock Exchange, not because we wanted, but because we wanted to see to the customers that even if we are a small company, we are publicly traded, we are transparent, they can trust into us. And you need to have experience. This is all about, we are deployed on 4 continents, because if you don't fly, if you don't get the experience, then nobody will let's say, actually believe you. And then the result is that you can do miracles. We as, again, small company, we have like 6 or 7 world records. Some of them are actually listed with the Guinness World Record, but not yet recognized. It will come a little bit later. So just again, to understand, it's not enough to say somebody builds a drone. You need to work in the structure, you need to have a lot of capabilities. Guillem, I'm okay with time, right? Still, I hope so. So that will be it. I wanted to give you some briefing. I wanted to give you a message, how it works from our perspective. And I believe we have a tremendous opportunity if we speak, if we meet, if we think that this is probably the area which we shouldn't omit. And I believe that it would be really smart for the European Commission and all the involved parties to think that this should be the future of the Europe in the aviation as well, next to the manned aviation. Thank you very much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Speaking next.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Jakub. I mean, the kind of key takeaways here is like Europe losing ground in terms of competitiveness, maybe too much regulation and safety driven, and not much experience pushed. Lack of a big strategy. So let's get back to that later on. But I think there are some key messages that we need to pick up. Now let's turn to you, Kevin. So Kevin, you are the Earth Observation Manager for in the Knowledge and Innovation Community for Climate, so the KIC for Climate, and you'll tell us more about what you do in the field of Earth observation for climate, basically. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation and to give you a different perspective on how space and observation, especially because we are mainly concerned with the downstream part of the space activities, can help us. So maybe at this level, or this point, it's important to give you a little bit of context about Climate KIC. Climate KIC is a knowledge and innovation community. It was created in 2010 alongside with a knowledge and innovation community on energy and digital affairs. So our main purpose was to support innovation, entrepreneurship, and education on climate change. So we have been very much focused on, just go back, yes. On a nutshell, just to read you exactly what we are. We are a knowledge and innovation community working to accelerate the transition to a zero carbon climate resilient society. Big words there. Climate change, as we know, is perhaps the most relevant problem that we are dealing with. It's not a problem that can be easily solved. That's why we talk about innovation. That's why we talk about resiliency. That's why we talk about transition from a place that we are currently in, which is a place that looks really bad, to be honest. The use of natural resources, the data that we see every time a COP ends, instead of seeing that we get together to reduce carbon dioxide, if you correlate the emissions and the time that we start meeting in Brazil, I think that it seems that we are meeting to increase carbon dioxide emissions instead of reducing the emissions. So we have big challenges, and what we're trying to do with the Climate Kick is to tackle this. As I said before, our approach was mainly looking at how we can come up with innovation solutions, how we can support entrepreneurs to get the products from ideas up to the market, and how we can also actually provide education that embeds entrepreneurship and embeds education and the values that we need to transit to this type of society. And in 2018-19, we moved to an approach which is mainly relying on systemic innovation, understanding that climate change is a problem that is systemic, that would affect the way we consume, it affects the way we move around, the clothes that we wear, the food that we eat. And if you don't tackle climate change in a systemic manner, I think what happens is that you don't really achieve that transition that we need to have, in which the different systems are designed to be really resilient and also to have net zero impact. So our main purpose, again, is to serve as and I'd like to point out on our mission, which is to catalyze systemic change for climate action. And to catalyze is to accelerate something happening, especially a chemical reaction, if it's a term that is especially used in chemistry. And to catalyze, we need to make use of technologies. And I think that leads to us getting involved 5 years ago in the use of the satellite data and trying to see how we can harvest the potential of satellite data to inform decision making, to make sure that we monitor the activities that we do and we really show real impact on what Climate Kick is doing in the interventions on circular economy, food systems, mobility, and so on. So we end up understanding the importance of climate data, climate services, being a strategic asset for us to really inform our policymakers, also to make sure that we are able, to, as I said before, to monitor and to record what we do and to being able to say the intervention that we had just done led us to this increase. And I think the only way to do it is to really use reliable information such as Earth observation data in our case. And as I said before, I think there is a huge potential for us to use satellite data, and there is, as I said, 50% of the reductions that we need could be eventually be harvested, or could be done, or could be achieved by digital technologies, and Earth observation data and space data being a significant part of that, which represents 50% of the reductions that we need to achieve by 2030. And the second part of my slide really addresses the importance of having precise and reliable data. We live in a world in which alternative facts are becoming more relevant. We heard in 2016 in the elections from the United States where we start hearing about facts, alternative facts, fake news, and information being disseminated really not based on truth, not based on anything that is actual factual. And the problem is that more and more of this information that has permeated general society, the way we choose politicians, the way decisions are being made are actually affected by the abundance of this type of alternative facts and information that is not really based on true observations. And I think we have in Europe, we have systems such as Copernicus, Galileo, that is giving us the opportunity to inform policymakers. The IPCC relies a lot on Copernicus data, and I think it's really important to retain the need to trust this information and to make decisions based on information and systems that are reliable, such as Copernicus. And then when it comes to the recommendations that we can provide and what we have observed when we work with SMEs, we noticed that sometimes solutions are available. There is a lot of valuable work done at university level that leads to spin-offs and to have solutions available on the market. And on the other hand, we see regions, cities, and public authorities having to deal with a range of problems to how to manage their forests, how to provide better information to their fishing communities, how to decrease the emissions that are affecting or producing more diseases at a local level due to pollution. And we see that on one side there are solutions, on the other hand there are needs, and sometimes we fail to make this match happen. And sometimes it's because we don't have enough systems to procure this type of technologies. Procurement systems sometimes are well known to just seek the solutions that have been used for some time. So my point here is that we have, through procurement, and especially through a public pre-commercial procurement, a very good opportunity for SMEs to work together with regional authorities or to procurers at regional level, national level, to co-develop solutions, to get funding, to get that product to the market, and without having the need to have a real strategy for commercialization, because this is a huge advantage when you look at pre-commercial procurement. You can work together with the procurer, you can get your product right to the market, and then you need to establish a new procurement process. And I think it's a huge opportunity to get R&D, support, money, but I think we need to make sure that this is happening more often, that the systems are well known, that the best practices are explored, and these type of opportunities, I think they should be supported. We know that there is a problem when it comes to funding. There's a lot of funding being, or companies being looking at the markets in the US because it's a high protected market and they're investing more and more. So we need to find solutions that support our SMEs, and I think pre-commercial procurement and effective procurement systems would be a solution for us to support our SMEs. My last point was also related to standardization of climate services. I think, again, coming back to the development of different solutions, technologies, as Jakob pointed out, China, Turkey developing products and therefore solutions along the way. It's very difficult for a procurer, it's difficult for someone that wants to seek a solution to understand whether this is something that is going to solve the problems. And I think by developing better standardization processes, we make sure that a potential buyer of these services has the certainty and the security of using information that is actually going to solve the problems. So I think we need to make sure that we do a lot of work to standardize the processes, to standardize services, to make sure that this is serving the procurers and serving the ones that are actually providing the solutions. And I think I just wanted to leave it there. It was 5 minutes, so I hoped I'd managed to convey certain ideas.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I mean, you mentioned skills. I'd like that we get back to that at some point. The importance of using satellite data from Copernicus and Galileo as a kind of reliable data that you can really use in an unbiased manner. Procurement standardization. I think it's quite interesting topics as well for the room and SMEs here. So now, without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Reinhard from the EU Agency for the Space Program, located here. Reinhard, you are dealing with market downstream and innovation in USPA, so please, if you can introduce a bit what you're doing.
Thanks, Guillaume. Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, based here, USPA based in Prague. I just had to take a tram. Was easier for me than for most of you. And I would like to give you a bit of an overview about the possibilities and opportunities USPA hopefully also can give in your hands. First of all, just roughly the background. We often talk about the EU space program. This is the EU space program in a nutshell. So we have heard, we have EGNOS, we have Galileo for navigation, we have Copernicus, world's biggest Earth observation program. We have GovSatcom as a predecessor of IRIS² that is knocking at our door. We'll have space situational awareness, knowing what is going on in our orbit, and some others, and these others are mostly looking down to Earth. When it's about especially SMEs and space, don't look up, not in the motto of the movie you might have seen, but look down. Space is down to Earth. Space is touching almost every sector imaginable, one way or the other, and the benefits are down to Earth. So how can we help you to grasp these benefits? I start with the second here, Horizon Europe, because Horizon Europe probably is the most established, well-known EU program for R&D. I like to rather interpret it into R&I, research and innovation. There I think most of you know about. I come back to that. What is a bit newer is Cassini and entrepreneurship. Cassini, conceived by the European Commission, which is especially looking at the small ones, not even SMEs in the strict sense, but even to the startups and maybe those who just have an idea, but not even a legal entity yet. We also look into hardware. That's amongst the fundamental elements program. Here we talk about chipsets, devices that are using differentiators coming from the different space data and services. And finally, we have been hearing about flying. We also have a dedicated grants program for aviation. If you want to get certified for EGNOS, be it as an airport, as an aircraft operator, as a pilot, there's help in that regard as well. Horizon. I'm quite happy that you are here today because the opportunities are open. Almost all of the opportunities that you can get are open right now. This is the biggest one in terms of volume, maybe not in terms of individual opportunity, but the biggest one in terms of volume. I will not read you the slide, but you will see that there's quite a vast range of topics touching all of the components that you have seen, touching all of the segments you can imagine, and you have different forms of procurement. You have the classical one, that's the innovation actions. That means there's a 70% funding rate. There are some areas where you get a 100% funded, those are not so close to the market. And then, and this is interesting to have heard just before, we also have something that is quite new, which is the PCP, the public pre-commercial procurement, exactly what you've heard 5 minutes ago, which is a new thing that we want to interpret in an innovative way. And what does it mean? Basically, you have something that's not yet commercial, you're a public entity, you want to work with private sector and especially with SMEs. Last, I mentioned biggest ever, we almost have 50 million euros of funds in this call. It's now open until March, you have the chance to participate. Very briefly, looking back, we are quite proud traditionally, always actually as GSA, now as EUSPA, to have reached a very high number of SMEs participating, be it in terms of revenues received, be it in terms of SMEs participating, or be it even in terms of SMEs leading our projects. 40% in the last call, and we do everything possible that this remains as high for the next call that you have just seen. Cassini, the new thing. This is, as I mentioned, conceived by the European Commission, and we are supporting our colleagues to get it on the road. And Cassini means many things. It means basically support at every stage of innovation, commercialization imaginable. From I have a piece of paper with an idea on it, I'm not even yet a legal entity, up to I'm close, or I'm having a prototype, I'm getting close to having a prototype, up to I have a prototype and I want to turn it into a product. I have a product and I need support to get it basically to the market. So in all stages, there are different means to support. And this has many forms. I don't go into details, but it means matchmaking, getting the ideas in contact with the funds. It means coaching. It means also trainings. Of course, it means funding. By the way, it means becoming part of the ecosystem, meeting fellow startups, etc., etc. One of the things is what we call the Cassini My EU Space Competition. I mentioned that because this is open right now, straightforward, 2 tracks. I have an idea or I have a prototype. Very straightforward, not a lot of admin. This is open now. What you can see here are the results from the last call. And maybe just 2 messages, not much admin work. Second, we are quite happy to have reached out to almost all member states, if not all member states, if I have a second glance here. So it is well received and it's winning traction. Right now it's the time to participate at the call that is open at this moment as we speak. Therefore, it's perfect timing having the SME assembly, thinking about space during the SME assembly. And when thinking about space, don't look up. The opportunities are at your fingertips. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reinhard. So basically, here lots of information about what the union is doing in support of SMEs and startups, including in terms of funding support. Before we take questions from the audience or from online audience as well, maybe I'd like to start with a very simple and basic question. Jakub, you had very nice slides highlighting really key challenges that you face. So would you pick up one big challenge that we would have to remove? So the one that would be potentially kind of game changer for a company like yours, where the big organization like the Union, the European Union, should really focus on. So which is the one that you would select? Question for you. And then for you, I mean, we're all in touch with many companies, many SMEs and startups, and I think it would be quite interesting to hear from you as well, which are, according to you, the biggest challenge that startups and SMEs do face today if they really want to develop a business in Europe. Let's start with you first.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think it's maybe surprising, but it's mandatory certification. Because I believe that should this technology move forward in Europe, we need to enforce the operators in any widest possible spectrum to force them to require the European certification for the products. Europe, as I said, is one of the largest markets for the US technologies, and should the European certification or compliance with the European standards, which you already have, no matter they are not fully used by all the market participants, should we enforce them as a obligatory criteria for any selection? I think that will make a tremendous change in terms of the background for the European SMEs and any European companies, because I cannot imagine much that China or Turkey or whatever are those companies producing the drones right now will follow with the European regulations. This is really what I see as a challenge, because obviously I was showing you what all we had to build in the company before we get the certification. So there will be some erasing of some companies. Some of them will fall on the ground and will not exist, but then the others which will survive because they will technically be excellent and able to achieve that, and they will have a significant market portion of the European market, and that will, according to my view, elevate the proliferation of the European technology in the segment. And I'm really not a fan of some obligatory requirements, but since we a little bit lost the train and the train is on the track already, I think that's one of the things which nobody can say anything negative about that, because it will really help, and it will help to elevate the European industry in this level.
Excellent. So mandatory certification
Yep.
as a game changer. Kevin, starting with you. So again, we're in touch with many SMEs. So what do you see as a kind of key challenge for them? The field of Earth observation, for instance, and doing business with space data. So what do you see there as kind of commonality when it comes to developing the business in Europe as an obstacle?
So I think what we've seen in the last 5 years is a change on the landscape. I think we're seeing it based on the geopolitical changes, also the COVID crisis that affected us all, cause certain activities or certain actions to be changed, the way we work, the way we recruit our staff. And we have seen that companies that are not flexible enough to react to these realities, to adjust to changes on the prices of oil and fuel in general, they struggle more to make it. So I think what we've seen is that companies that are able to push forward and to get the products to the market and to grow are companies that exhibit flexibility, that are able to work from different locations, that are have a new business model that allows them to take hits and to recover from these conditions. And I think it's something that is shaping the way businesses are being done, because if you set up a business now making a plan to grow in a certain way, and first you have a COVID crisis, which was something global, and then you have and in a way an energy crisis, it really shapes the way you organize and you develop your business. So I think something what we're seeing is that the ones that are able to survive these heats are companies which are flexible, that have business models which are not entirely depending on one single buyer, but have different revenue streams and are really easy to or able to adapt to these sudden changes. And it's something that is really happening and affecting the companies and the startups that they are in the market in these 4 years.
Excellent. So flexibility and ability to adjust quickly to the changing market conditions. Reinhard, what do you see?
Well, we are not an SME, so I would be pretentious to speak.
But you see
as
many
an
of them.
SME. However, maybe to address your question rather on the other way, how can we help SMEs to overcome some of the challenges with the means that we have in our hands as EUSPA, as the European Commission, as EU, based on the experience, especially in the past. The most important point is don't be afraid. Like, don't be afraid being an SME. We are too small, not an issue. Instruments are there. Don't be afraid when you see EU. EU is not so far, it's not so complicated, it's not so difficult, it's basically also shaped for you. And then, last but not least, we are in a space-related environment. Don't be afraid when you hear space. I said before, don't look up. Space is at your fingertips. You don't need to launch rockets. You are using space basically in your daily life, as you do in your daily ideas, in your business endeavors. And so basically, most likely, you are closer to space than you have had imagined, being an SME, a startup, or whatever growing and thriving business you are. And then 2 more points: get in touch. When you see EU, you think it's far away. It's not. Get in touch. There are many opportunities to mingle, to get into the ecosystem, to get inspired. And then finally, when you go for it, and you want to participate at one of those opportunities, do not think what they want to hear. Just convince us with what you would do anyway, so you don't lose time and you're more convincing and more authentic, and the chances are higher that you get funded. And so taking this together, I think it hopefully can help to overcome some of the challenges that we have heard right now or before.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Don't think I'll escape to that question. I'll tell you a bit what I see as a big challenge for SMEs and startups as well today. For me, key challenge number 1, and it's really quite interesting to hear that you're kind of self-made company, that you never got any EU support, any EU funding, but what I see as one of the biggest challenge for companies today is access to finance, and actually access to equities. We see that many startups and SMEs want to get access to equities today, especially in the field of space, because it gives you a boost in the scaling up of the company. But it's very hard to get access to equities today. Why? In Europe, because we have venture capital funds that are still very risk adverse. And the big challenge that we face, we as kind of commission, is this brain drain. That we have many companies looking for equities, so they're turning around once, 2 times, and then they go to the US. And that's the kind of big challenge that we face today. And that's what behind the Cassini fund and the kind of trying to really create traction in Europe and attract the VCs in Europe. Any questions from the audience? If not, then I can move to the second question I have in my mind. But any questions from you? Oyo. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was thinking about mandatory certification, and I think it is. Yeah, and I think it's a good thing. But at the same time, do an SME has resources for certification, because it's a quite expensive process. And I think that's for procurement also, the preparation for procurement, or even taking the certification or having the field to test, is something that requires money.
Yeah.
And one of the problems is if you are searching for some kind of support, you have to have that money in advance. So how do you get that money in advance? And it's not from the programs.
Yeah, it's a good question. I expected something like that because it's very, let's say, challenging to say that somebody requires something like which is a benchmark and you have to pass it beyond to get on the market. First, if I can tell you our company's story, that's one of the reasons why we went public. We had bless you, sir. We had some kind of strategy, a vision, which we believe that it's properly laid down. And by the way, as Reinhard said, we're really shooting for the sky. If you would meet my boss and the founder of the company, he always says, I want to be the largest company in the aviation segment. And he had that vision really clearly laid out. And when we achieved certain level, we really didn't start with a certification. It came naturally with a good product, because if you have a good product, it's like with the cars. You don't allow, as a European Union, to drive here Chinese or Turkey or whichever cars which are not certified. In the aviation, it's not driving on the way, it's falling. So there has to be some threshold which you need as a minimum to enter. Otherwise, unfortunately, the companies which are not meeting certain criteria are not able to demonstrate the safety of the product. I'm not saying they cannot develop a safe product. I know, Casper, we are out of time. I'm working on that. So there has to be a threshold, because in every aviation segment, imagine, including space, there exists. Yeah? And unfortunately, what I was laying down is that we are one of the largest markets for the technology, and we are not self-sufficient with the technology. We are importing basically everything as a continent. So I believe that this kind of mandatory certification will lead in 2 things. First, yes, there will be some companies disappearing from the market, but I don't think it's not achievable to get the funding. I really believe that in the US it might be easier, but I still believe there are funds you can get. And second, do you think that the large sharks, which are right now, supplying all the e-shops with the multicopters, will allow and ignore the European market? No, they will transfer the production here. They will transfer the R&D here. And this is maybe what is one of the ways how to get the technology here and how to put it in motion, because for the logistic traces, it's easier to get it from the closest source. So maybe we will transfer quite a lot of parts to be produced here. And we don't do that. That's where I see it. So the mandatory certification, I see a big parallel with the automotive industry, for example. There is a minimum certification. You cannot put even a cell phone holder into your car unless it's certified, if you want to do it legally. And nobody's complaining about that, because we are talking about the safety. But with the drones, somehow we miss the train, and we all think that's okay, that's the market, how it exists, and let's continue. It's not going to go in a good end, I think. So what I was trying to say by saying mandatory certification, I'm not excluding anybody on the market in my vision. What I'm saying is that you need to demonstrate compliance with the European standards in the unmanned aviation segments, which are actually highest in the world. They are better in the US. And then it's creating export potential for those companies, because if you excel and comply with European rules, I don't believe there is a country in the world which will say this is not enough. So,
Jakub?
Sorry, my bad.
Just one single question in one sentence.
Okay.
to
I get it.
conclude that panel. Let's start with you still, but in one sentence, really. What made you stay in Europe?
Patriotism.
Very good. What do you see as the kind of biggest competitive advantage we have globally? In one sentence.
I think our education system, the consistency, the high level of education that we have at Europe.
Reinhard?
2 words, talent and diversity.
Conclusion is stay in Europe. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Great.
Excellent.